A baby girl was pronounced stillborn. The doctor handed her lifeless body to the father to say goodbye. But something inexplicable happened right there, in the arms of the devastated millionaire. What happened next would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The millionaire surveyed the city from atop his empire of glass and steel. From up there, on the 78th floor, people looked like insignificant ants. Exactly how? He often considered them. He adjusted his custom-made Italian tie and checked his platinum watch. A gift from a sheik, grateful for his financial advice that had doubled an already absurd fortune. It was 3:43 p.m., and in 17 minutes, he would crush another company that dared to challenge him. His fingers drummed on the black marble desk as his secretary quietly entered the room. He didn't even look up from his documents. "Cancel my appointments for tomorrow, all of them." The woman hesitated, unusual for someone who had worked for the most feared man in finance for 5 years. "But sir, the meeting with the Japanese investors, I'm not asking for your opinion." His voice was as cold as Arctic ice. "Cancel everything. I have an ultrasound." The secretary's eyes widened, but she suppressed any further expression. She nodded and retreated discreetly. In the corridors, the news spread like wildfire. The millionaire, for the first time in 15 years, would be putting something above business. Far away, in an upper-middle-class suburb, a brown-haired woman caressed her 7-month baby bump. The room, freshly painted light yellow, was filled with stuffed animals and light wood furniture. The expectant mother smiled as she felt a kick. She picked up her cell phone and photographed her belly, where a small bulge indicated a little foot moving. She sent the image to the millionaire with the message, "I think we have a soccer player here." Upon receiving the message, the millionaire did something his employees would have considered impossible. He smiled, a genuine smile that completely transformed his face, usually marked by lines of tension and calculation. In the dead of night, when no one could see him, he browsed websites for children's decor, compared security systems for nurseries, and secretly composed lullabies in a leather-bound notebook he kept locked in his desk drawer. That child's life would be different from his. She wouldn't know the abandonment of a drunk father or the nights of hunger. She wouldn't feel the burden of starting to work at 12 or the pain of burying her mother without being able to afford proper treatment. His daughter would have everything, not just money and comfort, but the time and attention he never received. It was with this thought that 3 months later, he raced through the corridors of the most expensive private hospital in the city. The phone call had caught him in the middle of a billion-dollar negotiation. The pregnant woman had gone into premature labor. Something was wrong. The obstetrician, a middle-aged man with deep bags under his eyes and an arrogant expression, spoke in complex medical terms. Complications, saturation, fetal distress. The mother had been sedated after hours of pain, and now the millionaire heard words he never expected to hear. "We did everything we could, but the child didn't make it. I'm sorry." The world collapsed on his shoulders. The hospital walls seemed to close in around him as a nurse approached, carrying a small white bundle. The doctor was already walking away, checking his watch impatiently, when the millionaire found his voice. "I want to be alone with her." The nurse seemed to hesitate, but handed the tiny body into the trembling arms of the man who had never trembled before anything or anyone. The millionaire sat in the room's armchair, holding his daughter's body. The hospital staff had respected his request for privacy, leaving him alone with this irreparable loss. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of medical equipment in the hallway. His hands, which once moved billions with simple signatures, now trembled as he held the small white bundle. He gently pulled back the cloth covering. The girl's face. She was perfect. Tiny eyelashes, a button nose, lips that would never smile. A physical pain shot through his chest. "You should have had a chance," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I had so many plans for us." With his thumb, he caressed her tiny cheek. Her skin was cold, but not as cold as he expected. Something inside him refused to accept this reality. The man who controlled the fate of entire corporations couldn't influence the only thing that truly mattered. Without realizing it, he began to hum softly. The simple melody of the lullaby he had composed during sleepless nights, imagining what it would be like to hold his daughter for the first time. The cruel irony did not escape him. This was, in fact, the first and last time. Dream of the stars, little brave one. Sleep in peace, my precious jewel. As he sang, tears he hadn't shed in decades flowed freely. The millionaire, known for his calculated coldness, broke like a burst dam. He sang to the daughter who would never hear, rocking her gently as if he could comfort her. That's when he felt it, so subtle that he initially thought it was his imagination or the tremor of his own hands. But it happened again, an almost imperceptible movement against his chest. The tiny hand twitched. The millionaire froze. His breath stopped, his eyes fixed on the small form in his arms. Could it be possible? Or was the pain creating illusions in his mind? "Don't let me go crazy," he muttered to himself. But then he felt it again, this time unmistakable. A movement of the leg, small but definite. His heart raced violently. Years of self-control and rationality evaporated in an instant when a desperate shout escaped his lungs. "Help! She's alive!" The room door burst open. A young, recently hired nurse was the first to enter. Her eyes widened as she saw the millionaire standing, holding the child urgently. "She moved! I felt her moving!" The doctor entered right behind her with an expression that mixed irritation and pity. "Sir, I understand your suffering, but—" "Shut up and examine her!" The millionaire's voice resonated through the walls with an authority that made CEOs cower. The young nurse, ignoring protocol, approached quickly. "Let me check," she asked gently, extending her hands. The millionaire handed over his daughter reluctantly. The nurse placed the child on a flat surface and with precise movements checked her vital signs. Her eyes widened when she pressed 2 fingers against the small chest. "Doctor!" she exclaimed, "there's a heartbeat!" The doctor, incredulous, approached and checked for himself. The expression on his face changed drastically, from skepticism to surprise and then to professional panic. "Code Blue! We need a neonatal resuscitation team immediately!" Chaos engulfed the room. The medical team swarmed in, pushing the millionaire aside. He watched, stunned, as machines were connected to the fragile little body and urgent procedures were performed. "She's responding," announced one of the doctors after minutes that seemed like hours. The millionaire collapsed into the armchair, his legs unable to support him. In the midst of the whirlwind of emotions, a question flashed through his mind like lightning. How could that doctor not have noticed that his daughter was alive? 3 days had passed since the miracle, as the news outlets insisted on calling. The millionaire hadn't left the hospital for a minute. He had established a makeshift office in the neonatal ICU waiting room, from where he commanded his empire while keeping his eyes glued to the glass separating him from his daughter's incubator. The little one was fighting for her life. Tubes and machines monitored every beat of her miraculously resurrected heart. The doctors spoke in cautious terms, even with the hospital owner among the family members. "Every hour is a victory," they said. "It's still too early for prognoses." The millionaire, normally eloquent and dominant, responded only with silent nods. Something inside him had changed fundamentally. A suspicion grew in his mind, fueled by decades of identifying subtle patterns in human behavior. That morning, He watched with heightened attention as the young nurse, the first to believe his daughter was alive, checked the baby's vital signs. Unlike the other professionals, she constantly spoke to the baby, narrating each procedure in a sweet and encouraging voice. "How did you detect the heartbeat?" asked the millionaire abruptly. "When everyone else couldn't?" The nurse, surprised by the direct question, hesitated before answering. "I just did my job, sir." "No, you did more than that. You went against your superior." "Why?" The young woman nervously adjusted the heart monitor before answering in a low voice. "Because I was on the previous shift when your daughter was born. I saw the vital signs on the monitor before the doctor declared her dead. They were weak, but they were there." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine. The nurse continued, even quieter. "I tried to say something, but I was dismissed from the room. When I heard your shout, I knew I had to check again." The millionaire's eyes narrowed dangerously. Who was on duty besides the doctor? "I can't. I'll lose my job." "Your job? I'll buy this hospital before lunchtime if I have to." The woman looked around, making sure they were alone. "The doctor received a call before your wife's labor. He left the room for almost 10 minutes. When he came back, he seemed different, more rushed. That's when he decided he couldn't wait any longer to deliver the baby." A dangerous glint appeared in the millionaire's eyes. Something that his business adversaries knew well, but that had never appeared in personal matters. "Keep me informed about everything, absolutely everything." The child's mother, still weakened by the traumatic birth, was in another room. The millionaire spent hours at her side when he wasn't in the ICU. Holding her hand, he told her details about the little fighter who shared their DNA. "She has your eyebrows," he commented, trying to bring a smile to the woman's pale face, "and the same stubbornness as me. The doctors say she shouldn't be reacting so well, but she is." The woman squeezed his hand weakly. "Do you think it was really a miracle?" The millionaire hesitated. In all his adult life, he had never believed in anything beyond the power of money and intelligence. Miracles were for people without resources or influence. But that question deserved an honest answer. "I don't know if it was a miracle or incompetence," he finally replied, "but I intend to find out." That night, while watching his daughter through the glass, the millionaire made a call. On the other end of the line, a former private investigator who owed him favors listened attentively. "I want everything on the doctor, professional history, finances, communications, especially the phone calls from the last week. It's urgent." He hung up without waiting for an answer. He knew he would be taken care of. As he put away the phone, he noticed the young nurse watching him apprehensively from across the hall. Their eyes met, sharing a silent understanding. The millionaire wasn't a man to make empty promises, but there, as he watched his daughter's tiny chest rise and fall with the help of machines, he made a silent promise. If there was anything wrong with this story, someone would pay, and it wouldn't be with money. A week after the girl's birth, her vital signs had stabilized enough to astonish the medical team. Impressive, inexplicable, exceptional, words that the millionaire heard with a mixture of relief and growing suspicion. The first moment he could hold his daughter again, now officially alive, a knot formed in his throat. The little one had just been temporarily removed from the incubator for skin-to-skin contact. She weighed only 4 pounds, but her eyes, still blurred by the new light of the world, seemed fixed on his. "Hello, fighter," he whispered, feeling the fragile warmth against his chest. "You gave me quite a scare." The young nurse, who he now knew was named Julia, smiled as she adjusted the portable monitors still connected to the girl. "She recognizes your voice," she commented softly. "Talk more." The millionaire, accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives with a single word, suddenly felt speechless. What do you say to a soul that has returned from the brink? You're stronger than I've ever been, he said finally. And people call me a shark. That same day, his phone vibrated. An encrypted message from the investigator. Documents available. It's more serious than we thought. The millionaire waited until night, when the child's mother finally managed to sleep without medication, to slip into the hospital's underground parking garage. In the back seat of his armored Bentley, the investigator waited with a black briefcase. "Are you sure you want to see this?" asked the man, whose career in the police force had ended after reporting internal corruption. "Absolutely." The documents revealed a complex scheme. The obstetrician wasn't just arrogant, he was corrupt. His finances showed irregular deposits coinciding with specific births. The phone call received moments before the millionaire's daughter's birth came from a number linked to an influential politician in the area. His daughter was in labor the same day, explained the investigator, at the same hospital scheduled for many hours later. But suddenly she gained priority. The millionaire felt his blood boil. "My daughter was abandoned so he could attend to another patient. Worse than that, look at the fetal monitoring records. Your daughter showed signs of distress that required immediate intervention, but the doctor deliberately delayed it to attend to the politician's daughter first." The millionaire closed his eyes. For the first time, he perfectly understood the phrase, "seeing red." "How did you get these records? The hospital would protect them." The investigator smiled discreetly. "Let's just say that Nurse Julia isn't the only one bothered by the doctor's practices." Back at the hospital, the millionaire found himself at a moral crossroads he never expected to face. For years, he had used his power to crush competitors, absorb vulnerable companies, and maximize profits. Now, that same power could destroy careers, expose corrupt schemes, and possibly save future lives. But at what cost? His daughter would be exposed to public scrutiny. The miracle baby would become a media spectacle if he set the wheels of justice in motion. As he contemplated his options, he watched his daughter sleeping in the incubator. He had often heard rumors that he had no heart, that he was a calculating machine dressed as a man. Ironically, it was a life so small that it could barely breathe. On its own, that made him feel his heart beat stronger than ever. The decision crystallized when Nurse Julia entered the room, her eyes red from suppressed tears. "We lost a baby today," she whispered, "born with the same complications as your daughter." The doctor was slow to respond, just slow. The millionaire nodded slowly. "How many came before my daughter? How many weren't as lucky as her?" "I can't say for sure, but it wasn't the first." That night, while the silent hospital corridors witnessed only the constant hum of machines, the millionaire made a series of calls. To his lawyer, to a judge friend, to an investigative journalist who owed him favors, and finally, to the hospital's board of directors. "I want a meeting. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. If anyone is absent, I will consider it a confession of guilt." He hung up and sat down again next to the incubator. He placed his hand on the transparent glass, almost touching the sleeping little one. "You know, little one," he murmured, "your dad has always been good at taking people down, but never for such an important reason." The hospital's meeting room seemed too small to contain the tension that filled the air. On one side, the entire board of directors nervously settled into leather chairs. On the other, the millionaire, alone except for the presence of his lawyer and a black briefcase identical to the one he had received in the parking lot. "Gentlemen," he began with the calm and controlled voice he used before closing big deals, "I imagine you're curious about this urgent summons." The chairman of the board, a gray-haired man with a calculatedly neutral expression, cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss any concerns you have with your daughter's treatment. I'm happy to report that the latest tests show considerable improvement, and I'm not here to discuss just my daughter," interrupted the millionaire. I'm here for all the children who have passed through these hands." With a precise gesture, he opened the briefcase and spread documents on the table. Medical records, bank statements, transcripts of phone calls. "The doctor, your head of obstetrics, has been prioritizing patients based on influence and payments," he stated coldly. "As a result, babies have suffered, some irreparably, including my daughter, who was declared dead due to negligence." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of pages being nervously flipped through. The chairman of the board visibly paled. "These are very serious allegations and completely unfounded. You are emotionally shaken by the recent trauma, which is understandable, but emotionally shaken." The millionaire's voice remained low, but carried the weight of a contained avalanche. "Mr. Chairman, in my 20 years in the financial market, I've liquidated companies larger than this hospital for errors smaller than leaving my daughter for dead." The millionaire's lawyer intervened with calculated precision. "My client is generously offering a settlement before taking this evidence to the authorities and the press." The chairman of the board's face hardened. "Blackmail is a crime, gentlemen." The millionaire smiled for the first time, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Blackmail would be if I were demanding something for my personal benefit. What I'm offering is an opportunity for institutional redress." At that moment, the room door opened and Nurse Julia entered, accompanied by 3 other hospital professionals. The millionaire hadn't called any of them. "Excuse the intrusion," said Julia, her voice trembling but determined. "But we heard about this meeting and we need to testify." The chairman of the board stood up, visibly irritated. "This is a private meeting. You don't have authorization to—" "They have my authorization," interrupted the millionaire. "And I suggest you listen to them before making any decisions." One by one, the professionals reported similar cases. Priority patients being attended to first, regardless of medical urgency. Medical records altered after complications. The pattern was clear and disturbing. The chairman of the board sank slowly into his chair. The reality was undeniable, even for those who benefited indirectly from the scheme. "What exactly are you proposing?" he finally asked. The millionaire pushed a sealed envelope across the table. "My terms are simple. First, immediate dismissal of the doctor and a complete internal investigation. Second, implementation of a transparent priority protocol for all births. Third, creation of a compensation fund for families affected by proven negligence." He paused before continuing. "If these conditions are accepted and implemented, my lawyer will keep this evidence in a safe deposit box. Otherwise, tomorrow it will be on the district attorney's desk and on the front pages of every newspaper." The tension in the room was palpable. The chairman stood up again. "We need to discuss this in private." "You have 1 hour," replied the millionaire, checking his platinum watch. "Meanwhile, I'll be with my daughter." In the neonatal ICU, the little one had been taken out of the incubator for the first time, dressed in a onesie that looked gigantic on her tiny body. She rested in her mother's arms, who finally had the strength to hold her. "How did the meeting go?" she asked, noticing her partner's somber expression. "Still ongoing," he replied, sitting down next to them. "But I believe we've made progress." He watched in admiration as that fragile being had completely transformed his priorities. The calls from foreign investors continued unanswered. The financial market speculated about his sudden disappearance. None of that mattered as he watched his daughter breathe, each breath of victory against the negligence that had almost taken her away. "You realize," the mother commented softly, "that you genuinely hate someone for the first time in your life. Before it was just business." The millionaire reflected for a moment. "Maybe, but I'm also defending someone for the first time instead of just my own interests." When his phone vibrated exactly 1 hour later, the message was short. "The board agrees to discuss your terms." The millionaire smiled, but it wasn't the calculating smile of business. It was the smile of a father who was beginning to understand that the greatest wealth wasn't measured in dollar signs. 2 months passed. The little fighter had finally been cleared to go home, still needing special care, but surprisingly stable. For someone who had been technically dead, the millionaire had transformed an entire wing of his mansion into a mini hospital with state-of-the-art equipment and a 24-hour medical team. Nurse Julia had accepted the invitation to lead this team, resigning from the hospital after the implementation of the new safety protocols. The obstetrician had been discreetly removed, without public fanfare, as per the agreed settlement. That sunny autumn afternoon, as he watched his wife rocking his daughter in the mansion's garden, the millionaire received an unexpected call. It was his private investigator. "I found something you need to see, something that wasn't in the initial documents." Hours later, sitting in his private office, the millionaire analyzed the new documents with an increasingly grim expression. They were medical records from previous years, all with a similar pattern of negligence, but with a disturbing detail. "All these babies have something in common," he murmured to the investigator. "They were born with the same rare complication that my daughter had." "Exactly," confirmed the investigator. "And there's more. The doctor has been publishing scientific articles about this specific condition. He's building an academic reputation based on these cases." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. "So he's experimenting?" "Not directly, but the data suggests that he's intentionally selecting which babies receive immediate intervention and which don't, to document the natural progression of the condition." The millionaire closed his eyes, trying to control the anger that was rising in his chest. "And my daughter? Why was she chosen for the group that wouldn't receive intervention?" The investigator hesitated before answering. "I found communications between the doctor and a colleague at the university. He hesitated again. "He knew who you were. He knew about your history of hostile takeovers. Apparently you acquired and dismantled a pharmaceutical company where his brother worked." The millionaire felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His daughter had almost died for revenge, for something he had done years before, without even remembering the faces of the hundreds of employees affected. "So it wasn't just for money or to favor the politician," he concluded in a hoarse voice. "It was personal." "Looks like it. And there's one more thing you need to know." The investigator slid one last document across the table, a DNA test. "When I asked Nurse Julia for samples to check for possible sequelae in the affected babies, she mentioned something about inconsistent blood typing, so we performed more extensive tests." The millionaire felt his mouth go dry as he read the results. According to the document, his daughter's DNA showed a rare hereditary genetic condition, a condition that wasn't present in either him or the child's mother. But that, coincidentally, appeared in all the children who had suffered from the doctor's negligence. "That's not possible," he murmured, rereading the results. "There must be some mistake." "I did the test 3 times with different samples," replied the investigator. "There's no mistake." The millionaire stood up abruptly, knocking the chair over behind him. "What does this exactly mean?" he asked, although he already suspected the answer. The investigator remained firm, accustomed to delivering devastating news. "It means that, genetically speaking, this child is not your biological daughter." The words fell like an avalanche on the millionaire. The room spun for a moment as he tried to process the information. How is that possible?" "There are few explanations," replied the investigator. The most likely is embryo swapping in the case of in vitro fertilization. Or, we conceived naturally, interrupted the millionaire. Then there's only one possibility left: deliberate baby swapping at the maternity ward. The revelation was like an abyss opening beneath his feet. It wasn't enough that negligence had almost killed the child. There was something even darker happening at that hospital. The millionaire hadn't slept for 72 hours. He walked through the mansion like a ghost while his mind worked incessantly. Outside the baby's room, he watched his wife rocking, the little one, humming softly the same song he had composed months before. He hadn't told her about the discovery. How could he? The woman was finally smiling again after weeks of physical and emotional recovery. The connection between mother and daughter was visible, palpable, a bond that transcended the traumatic moment of birth. Julia, the nurse, approached silently in the hallway. "She needs to rest," she whispered, referring to the mother. "And so do you." The millionaire nodded mechanically, but didn't move. "You haven't visited her today," Julia observed cautiously, "or yesterday. The baby misses you." "How could she miss me?" The response came out more bitter than he intended. "I'm nothing to her, biologically speaking." Julia studied his face for a long moment before answering. "You're the one who brought her back. Your voice, your touch, your refusal to accept. Does that mean nothing?" The millionaire remained silent. Throughout his life, he had built his decisions on concrete facts, numbers, projections. Feeling had never been a factor in his equations. Now, he felt lost in uncharted territory. "We need to do more testing," he murmured finally. "Find out who she really is the daughter of. Her real biological parents may be looking for her, suffering the loss of a child they believe has died." The thought was devastating. On the one hand, the idea of losing the girl for whom he had developed a deep and unexpected love. On the other, the possibility that somewhere a couple was suffering a pain he had briefly known, the pain of believing that their biological daughter was dead. "Let's continue with the investigations," he decided, walking away from the door. "But keep this between us for now." In the following weeks, the private investigator tracked down all the births that had occurred at the hospital that week. He identified 5 other children with the same rare genetic condition. One of them had officially passed away. The other 4 had survived with varying degrees of complications. All the families had their deliveries with the same doctor, confirmed the investigator. And there's another pattern. All the families had something that the doctor could consider valuable for his research. And the DNA tests of these children? We managed to get samples from 2 of them through the follow-up protocols that we implemented at the hospital. Both showed genetic inconsistencies with their supposed parents. The millionaire felt his heart sink even further. So he was systematically swapping babies to study this specific genetic condition. It seems so, probably selecting influential families who could provide the best postnatal treatment even with complications. The magnitude of the crime was almost incomprehensible. The doctor hadn't just neglected babies, he had deliberately separated them from their biological families, creating an unauthorized human experiment. That night, the millionaire found himself sitting on the edge of his bed, contemplating the ethical abyss before him. The decision he needed to make was impossible: reveal the truth and potentially separate several children from families who already loved them as their own, or keep the secret, allowing biological families to continue believing in the death of their children. A soft cry interrupted his thoughts. On the baby monitor, he saw the little one stirring in her crib. Before he realized what he was doing, his feet carried him to the room. His wife was sleeping exhausted in the armchair next to it. Careful not to wake her, he approached the crib. The girl stared at him with wide eyes, as if she recognized him after days of absence. Her little arms reached out towards him. "Hello, little fighter," he whispered, gently lifting her up. Her weight in his arms felt familiar, right, even knowing that they didn't share the same blood. Something deeper had formed in the crucial moments when he had held her between life and death, singing a song he had composed even before meeting her. "It doesn't matter where you came from," he murmured, rocking her gently. "You are my daughter, and I'll make sure that every wrong is righted without you or your mother suffering anymore." As he cradled the child, a certainty grew in his chest. Love wasn't a matter of DNA. It was a choice he had already made the moment he had refused to accept that little heart had stopped beating. The conference room on the top floor of the district attorney's office was hermetically sealed. The blinds blocked any view, and listening devices ensured absolute privacy. Around the oval table, tension hung like a dense fog. On one side, the district attorney and 2 federal investigators. On the other, the millionaire, his lawyer, and the private investigator. On the table, folders organized chronologically, recounting a medical and ethical nightmare of unimaginable proportions. "This is..." The district attorney ran his hand through his graying hair, clearly shaken. "This is monstrous." The millionaire nodded silently. The evidence was irrefutable. DNA tests, altered records, patterns of baby transfers, all pointing to a systematic scheme conducted by the obstetrician. 5 years, continued the district attorney. At least 27 babies swapped, according to our preliminary estimates, all with the same rare genetic condition. "He was creating his own longitudinal study," explained the private investigator, "placing children with this specific condition in families with financial resources to provide advanced treatments while documenting the results for academic publications." "And where are the biological children of these families?" questioned one of the federal investigators. A heavy silence dominated the room before the millionaire's lawyer answered. "Some have passed away due to lack of adequate treatment. Others have been adopted through irregular procedures. We are still tracking them all." The district attorney closed the folder in front of him, his expression a mixture of nausea and determination. "We're going to arrest him today, and everyone involved. This is kidnapping, forgery, criminal medical negligence." "No," interrupted the millionaire, surprising everyone in the room. "Not yet." For the first time since the beginning of the meeting, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "If we act rashly, the consequences for the families will be devastating. Parents discovering that the child they have raised for years is not biologically theirs. Biological families discovering that their children, who they believe to have died, are alive and being raised by others." "I understand your concern," replied the district attorney cautiously, "but I can't simply ignore crimes of this magnitude." "I'm not asking you to ignore them. I'm asking for a different approach." The millionaire slid a closed folder across the table. "My proposal." The district attorney examined the documents with growing interest, occasionally raising his eyebrows. In surprise, "This is unconventional." "But legal," added the millionaire's lawyer. "We've vetted every aspect." The plan was meticulous. First, a confidential task force would identify all affected families. Teams of psychological assistants would be formed to assist in the process of discovery and decision-making. A substantial fund, financed personally by the millionaire, would be established to guarantee lifelong support for each child, regardless of the decisions of the families involved. "The families would have options," explained the millionaire. "Keep the child they raised as their own, meet the biological family and establish some kind of shared relationship, or in extremely rare cases, consider restitution. All with professional guidance and without unnecessary public exposure." "And the doctor?" asked the district attorney. "Full justice, but through a process that minimizes trauma for the victims." The meeting stretched on for hours, detailing every aspect of the plan. When they finally reached an agreement, the sky was already darkening beyond the windows. On the way back home, the millionaire's driver noticed his boss unusually silent, watching the city through the tinted windows. "Is something wrong, sir?" The millionaire reflected for a moment before answering. "Do you know what the difference is between the man I was 6 months ago and the man I am today?" The driver, who had worked for him for over a decade, ventured, "Fatherhood, sir?" "Not exactly." The millionaire continued to watch the city lights. "Before, I used my power for my own benefit. Now I'm using it to protect people I'll never meet, without any personal return." "That sounds like a significant change, sir." "The strangest thing is that I feel stronger, not weaker, as if I've discovered a new kind of power." Arriving home, he found his wife in the baby's room, reading stories, even though she knew the little one didn't yet understand the words. The domestic scene, so distant from the corporate offices where he had built his empire, now seemed the center of his universe. Later, with the child asleep, he finally mustered the courage for a conversation delayed for weeks. "I need to tell you something," he said to his wife, "about our daughter." The woman studied his face carefully. "You found out that she's not genetically ours, didn't you?" The surprise on his face was evident. "You knew?" "I suspected. The blood types didn't make sense. I asked Julia to check discreetly." She held his hand firmly. "It doesn't matter. She's our daughter in every way that truly matters." The relief that the millionaire felt was immense. He hugged his wife for a long time in silence before asking, "What if there are biological parents looking for her, suffering from the loss? Then we'll do what's best for everyone, including her." The woman smiled sadly, but mostly for her. That night, for the first time in weeks, the millionaire slept soundly. The path ahead would be complex, but he was sure of one thing. The girl he considered his daughter would never know abandonment or rejection, nor would any evil come from her to the world if he could help it. Somehow, a tragedy that had begun with greed and cruelty was transforming into something different, something that perhaps could bring healing where there had only been pain before. 6 months had passed since the meeting at the district attorney's office. The silent operation to identify and contact all the families affected by the doctor's scheme had progressed with surprising discretion. The millionaire, using his influence and resources, had ensured that each case was handled with extreme sensitivity. On that sunny spring morning, a young woman with a fragile appearance and her husband waited nervously in the mansion's living room. It was the first meeting, the most difficult of all. The millionaire's wife entered first, carrying the little one in her arms. The girl, now almost a year old, looked curiously at the strangers with large brown eyes. "She has your eyes," commented the millionaire's wife softly, addressing the visitor. The woman covered her mouth with her hands, silent, tears streaming down her face. Her husband held her hand firmly, also visibly moved. Can I hold her?" asked the visitor in a trembling voice. It was a moment of indescribable tension and beauty. The transfer of the child from one pair of arms to another, laden with meaning beyond words. The girl, surprisingly, didn't cry. She looked curiously at the face of the woman who unknowingly was her biological mother. The millionaire watched from the door, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. The team of psychologists had prepared everyone for this moment, but no theoretical preparation could really encompass the emotional complexity of what they were experiencing. "We thought she had died," explained the visitor, while his wife cradled the child. "They showed us a body so fast. They said it was best not to look too closely, that the complications had deformed her. They forged a funeral," he continued. "We received a small coffin, everything so fast while we were still in shock." The millionaire felt a wave of nausea as he imagined the cruelty of the scheme. The doctor hadn't just swapped the babies, he had created elaborate stories to cover up his crimes. "And your daughter," began hesitantly the millionaire's wife. "Our biological daughter." The visitors exchanged glances before answering. "She's fine. She's the same age, obviously. Healthy, happy." After the initial revelation, they had been informed that their biological daughter had been given to a family in the countryside who believed they had legally adopted an orphan. That family didn't know anything yet. They would be the next step in the process. The conversation continued for hours, sharing stories, showing photos, trying to process the unthinkable. The psychologist present occasionally offered guidance, but mostly observed, letting the natural process of connection flow. Near the end of the meeting, the visitor asked the millionaire directly, "What happens now? Legally, I mean." The millionaire took a deep breath. "That depends entirely on you, on all of us. There are no clear precedents for this situation. The well-being of the children needs to be the absolute priority." "We love her," stated the millionaire's wife in a firm voice. "From the first moment, biologically yours or not, and we never stopped loving ours," replied the visitor softly, "even believing she was dead." The silence that followed carried the weight of impossible decisions. It was the visitor who finally spoke, with a clarity that surprised everyone. "No one here needs to lose the daughter they love. Maybe we can create an arrangement where both girls can know their origins without being torn from the families they know." The proposal was radical, modern, challenging, but also deeply human. "Like an extended family," suggested the millionaire's wife, hope growing in her voice. "We would need to move closer," considered the visitor, already planning possibilities. The millionaire watched, amazed, as what could have been a devastating conflict transformed into something completely different. A collective search for healing. That night, after the visitors had left with promises of future meetings and preliminary plans, the millionaire found himself again in his daughter's room. The little one slept peacefully, oblivious to the complex negotiations about her future. "You know," said his wife, entering the room silently, "when I met you, I never imagined that one day you would be the center of a healing network for traumatized families." He smiled melancholically. "Neither did I. I think I needed to almost lose something truly important to understand what I really value." "What happened to the doctor?" she asked. It was a question she had avoided for months. "He's being prosecuted quietly. He confessed everything in exchange for considerations in sentencing. The evidence was irrefutable." He paused before continuing. "I asked him why he did it. Do you know what he said? What? To advance science. As if human lives were mere variables in an experiment." The millionaire shook his head. "I've spent my life treating people like pieces on a chessboard. I'm not as different from him as I'd like to be." His wife took his hand firmly. "The difference is that you changed. When confronted with the true value of a human life, you chose the difficult path, the right path." He looked at his sleeping daughter, for whom he was already planning an extraordinary future. A future that would now include more people who would love her, more history, more truth. It would be complex, but also richer. "You know what's ironic?" he commented. "For years, I built my identity around what I owned. Now, what I value most isn't really mine in the traditional sense." "Love is never a matter of possession," his wife replied softly. "It's a matter of giving." 2 years had passed since the day a girl declared dead had moved her tiny hand in the arms of a devastated father. The garden of the millionaire's country house, the same one he had bought years before when he learned of the pregnancy, was decorated with colorful balloons and tables elegantly arranged under white canopies. It was an unusual celebration, The third birthday of two girls born on the same day in extraordinary circumstances, connected by a destiny that no one could have foreseen. The little one, the millionaire had carried in his arms, was now running across the lawn, chasing butterflies with an almost identical girl, her biological sister. The two families, initially united by trauma and loss, had forged a unique relationship, sustained by mutual respect and the shared love for the children. "I never imagined this would be possible," commented the girl's biological father, approaching the millionaire with 2 glasses of champagne. "I thought we'd be in court until today, fighting for custody." The millionaire accepted the glass, watching the girls playing. 3 years ago, I would have solved this like any other problem, with expensive lawyers and aggressive tactics." He paused reflectively. Interestingly, the most difficult solution ended up being the most satisfactory for everyone. The arrangement they had built was innovative. The children remained with the families who had raised them since birth but met regularly. As they grew older, they would gradually learn about their origins, with ongoing psychological support. The biological families had moved to nearby residences, creating a community united by the extraordinary circumstance. Other similar cases among the families identified in the investigation followed diverse paths. Some opted for similar solutions. Others preferred to keep their distance, connecting only through letters and occasional photos. Each situation was unique, treated with the delicacy it deserved. The doctor responsible for the criminal scheme was now serving a sentence in federal prison after a discreet trial that spared the families from public exposure. The case had motivated significant reforms in hospital protocols throughout the country, with improved security systems for preventing baby swaps. To the surprise of the financial world, the millionaire had gradually distanced himself from his companies, delegating operational control to dedicate himself to a new mission. The Second Breath Foundation, created by him, was intended to promote medical ethics and support families affected by hospital negligence. "Daddy, come see what I found!" The girl's voice interrupted his thoughts. She ran towards him, holding something delicately in her hands. He crouched down to be at her level. "What do you have there, little one?" "A baby bird. It fell out of the nest." The concern on her little face was palpable. "We need to help it." The millionaire observed the sparrow chick trembling in his daughter's tiny hands. The other girl approached too, equally concerned. "Let's build a nest for it," suggested the millionaire, "and feed it until it can fly." The simplicity of the solution seemed to satisfy the girls, who ran to find suitable materials, closely followed by their mothers. "Extraordinary, isn't it?" commented the other father, observing the scene. "How they instinctively care about such a small life." "It's almost as if they understand," replied the millionaire, "the value of a second chance." Later, as the party ended and guests said goodbye, the millionaire found a moment of solitude on the terrace. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Julia, the nurse who had first believed in the miracle, now director of the foundation, joined him silently. "I often think about that night in the hospital," she commented after a few moments. "If you hadn't insisted on holding your daughter, if you hadn't had the courage to check when I called out, if the heart monitor had been connected correctly from the beginning." Both contemplated the chain of events, some tragic, others miraculous, that had brought them there. "You know what I've learned?" asked the millionaire, watching the children sleeping in their parents' arms. "That true wealth isn't what you accumulate, but what you rescue when all seems lost." "Some people spend their whole lives without discovering that," replied Julia. "I almost was one of them." Twilight advanced, plunging the garden into soft shadows. On the lawn, the small makeshift nest housed the sparrow chick, a fragile life protected by the care of children who themselves had survived against all odds. The millionaire watched the scene with a feeling that still surprised him daily: gratitude. Not for the financial empire, not for the mansions or private jets, but for the improbable journey that had transformed a man who only knew the value of money into someone who finally understood the immeasurable value of life. Money buys many things, he reflected almost to himself, but the real miracle was discovering that what really matters isn't for sale. In the children's room, later, he hummed softly the same lullaby that years before had brought his daughter back to life. The notes flowed naturally now, carrying not only melody, but history, redemption, and promise. The girl who had returned from the dead would sleep tonight, and every night, knowing herself deeply loved. And the man, once known only for his calculated coldness, would watch over her sleep, guardian not only of a child, but of a hard-won truth: that sometimes you have to almost lose everything to discover that the heart, just like life, always finds a way to beat again. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.